Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Sierra and I'm so glad you could be joining me today. So we're about a week out from my birthday and I am turning 20 this year. Yay. That's crazy. It feels like such a grown-up age. I know it's really not, but it feels like it. But I thought for today's video it would be really fun to go and take a look back at my teenage years. So I grouped them into eras, and each era has its own little name, and we are going to tier rank them. So this is going to be a very brutally honest video, looking back from when I was 13 all the way until my current age of 19, and it's gonna be a wild ride. So I'm gonna go ahead and begin by telling you guys what tiers I'm gonna be ranking these into. The top one, so what would be our S tier, is best of times. This is the category for my favorite eras, my thriving eras, the eras that are just unmatched. And then we have lesson. Most of what I'm gonna go over in this video could qualify as a lesson. So I wanna really save this category for like, oh yeah, that was like a big monumental lesson, life-changing. And then we have indifferent. These are the eras that I'm just kind of like, it happened. Kind of remember it, kind of don't. It didn't really have too much of an effect on who I am as a person, who I am now. And then we have she was something. These are for the eras that you just look back on and you're like, what even happened? What was that? Why? And then on our bottom tier, we have never again. These are for the worst of the worst. The eras I would rather not go back to say the least. So we're going to go ahead and begin with my first era. This was when I was 13 to 14 and I couldn't think of a name for this one, so I called it my crusty dusty era because I was a little tween, and you know, we've all been there. Your tween beginning teen years aren't your best. They just simply aren't your best. I had just started middle school. I was definitely feeling a little bit of the mental illness starting to creep in there. And while I was looking for photos to insert into this video, I saw some pictures of myself from this time period, which is what inspired the name Crusty Dusty, because kind of ew. Like I was a baby, but it was ew. But yeah, this wasn't a very monumental time period. It was like, what, like 6-7 years ago now? And nothing significant enough happened for me to be like, oh my god, I wish I was 13 again. Who's ever said that and meant it? So, for the reasons just stated, crusty and dusty is going into indifferent. The next era we're getting into some of the tea, and that is my toxic relationship era. Little middle school Sierra decided to get into a relationship with a guy who wasn't the best, I'll put it that way. I'm not gonna go like fully into it. I know I said we're spilling all the tea, but just in case he sees this, you know, we were young, which doesn't excuse anything because you're both young, but at the same time, I'm not gonna like put him on blast, but it was a very toxic, manipulative, and like emotionally abusive relationship, and my parents found out about it while they were going through my text messages, and they got freaked out and super mad, and they actually ended up pulling me out of the entire school. So I was homeschooled for the rest of the year. You know, I wasn't allowed to see my friends, like any of them, and got all my electronics taken away. I had no contact with anyone besides like the family who I lived with, who I didn't have the best relationship with at the time. So it's just not a good era. I'm very torn on where to put this one. It's between lesson and never again, because I definitely learned a lot. During this time, would I want to go back to it? Never. Simple as that. But had I not gone through that, a lot would have been different, and I learned a lot of really like important things, especially when it comes to relationships and how to recognize the toxic signs. So for that reason, I am putting my toxic relationship era into lesson. So the next era is something that I feel like anybody who's around my age can relate to, and that is the COVID era. So the lockdown started while I was halfway through my sophomore year, and it carried on until the end of my junior year. So I spent a year and a half doing distance learning, and it was quite the time. It was kind of miserable, just kind of the same thing with like the end result of the toxic relationship era was, you know, me being stuck at home, and it was the same thing all over again. Only this time I actually liked being at school because I liked my friends and I viewed it as sort of an escape from my home life. I did not thrive in distance learning. I am so jealous and also equally so happy for the people who enjoyed distance learning and really like thrived off of it. I was not one of those people. I was so unmotivated the entire time. I went from a like straight A student to a failing student in the course of a year, and your junior year is easily like one of the most important crucial years of your high school experience. That's the year like all your big important tests are, and it's also the year that most colleges really look at. So it wasn't the best for me to fail that year. I would say I'm going to put my COVID era probably into never again, because fingers crossed, like don't want to jinx it, please no. But yeah, it's something I would never enjoy going through again. My next era is my am I an adult yet era. And I named this because I just wanted to be an adult. I wanted like that freedom so bad. Like I feel like when you're a teenager, you really, really yearn for that like freedom and that independence. And then it just gets like more intense the closer you get to actually being an adult. So this era was when I was 17 to like the mid of 18. So like the summer of me being 18. And honestly, kind of a good era. A lot changed. I mean, it's the things that every teenager looks forward to, I feel like. You know, the getting your license. I got my first car when I turned 18. Started getting tattoos literally like 2 weeks after my birthday. And then I got like 3 in the span of 2 months because I was just really gung-ho on that. Summer came around, I graduated. I really felt like I was on like the top of the world during this era. Like I was just so happy and I was like low-key thriving. Like it's like all the things that I had been dreaming of and waiting of for years were finally happening, and it was like one after another. So I would probably put Am I an Adult Yet in my best of times category. Because it was good and it was very contrast to the next era, which is my I'm sorry, what era. So this is the end of me being 18. The last probably 5-6 months. And this is when everything went from being just amazing to what's even happening right now. This era, it was short-lived, thank God for that, but it was so unexpected and life-changing. So there were 2 major things that went wrong during this era that really defined this time in my life, and in turn defined how I look back on me being 18, because they were that monumental. The first one was that I got kicked out by my family. It's a story I've never told on the internet. I actually filmed a video, like a story time video, for what happened, and I decided not to post it. It was a little too, like, honest, a little too raw. It was something I didn't want to, like, get back to my parents or my family, so I scrapped that video. And maybe one day I'll tell the story of what happened. It's really crazy. But for right now, I'm just gonna leave it at I was kicked out Halloween night around midnight, and I ended up living with my brother, who lives about an hour away from my parents' house, and my job, and commuting every day, back and forth. And honestly, at first, it was horrible. It's something that nobody should go through. It's something that nobody wants to go through. But it also ended up being that push I needed later on to really like get out of my shell and find independence. Because I'm the type of person, when I get too comfortable in a situation, even if it's not a good situation, I'll stay because it's what I'm used to. And this really just pushed me out of that. And then the other thing that happened, I've actually made a full video on this, which I will link down below. Another crazy story time. I got fired from my job. I'm not gonna say too much on that because I already made a video, but it's like in the span of 3 months, everything I knew in my life just kind of got flipped upside down. And on top of that, you know, it was after graduation, so all of my friends from high school moved far away to go to college, and I felt very isolated during this time. So my next era is my adulthood era. This was like the very end of me being 18 until like the middle of me being 19. And this was when I got to actually start experiencing adulthood. I started dating my now fiance Zach. I moved in with him, and I learned very quickly that adulthood is not super easy. You know, we really made the most of it. This is definitely an era that I'm more indifferent to, I'd say, just because really not a lot happened, but it also felt like everything was happening all at once because everything was so new. But like there were some lessons learned there, but not enough to qualify me putting it into that category. So I'm just gonna put it into indifferent. I feel like there's not a lot I have to really say about that era. My last era is my thriving era. This is the era from mid-19 all the way up until now. I'd say a lot has changed, definitely for the better. I decided to start this era off at one of the most monumental parts of my life so far, which was my engagement, and that really just kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. Apart from the engagement, I also got a really good job, which makes me very happy. I actually have the same hours as Zach now. I've kind of touched on this and shown like the process of me trying to find this job, and it's worked out. I don't know if it's like the new year still like influencing my brain to be like new year, new me, blah blah blah. But I just have a really good feeling about 2024, a really good feeling about, you know, my 20s, turning 20. Originally I wasn't even gonna do like a ranking my eras video. It was gonna be more of like a love letter to my teens, and I was like, there's not a lot to say about that. I think I actually scripted that video like completely, and I think the one thing I would take from that is there were so many lessons in my teenage years that I feel so grateful to be able to take into my 20s and like later years in life. I'll be 20 next time you guys see me, which is crazy. So yeah, I hope you guys had a very safe and happy new year. I hope your January is going so great so far, and you're keeping up with your New Year's resolutions if you made some. Let me know down below what your New Year's resolution was, and you guys can follow me on my socials. I'm super active. It's a fun time, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!